for me, and I'll introduce Christ to you because he loves you so.
I've been preaching since 1985.
Been preaching for about 9 years now.
I'm an elementary school teacher in the Mount Vernon City School District. I've been in public service teaching for about 20 years.
For 14 years, I was in the social service field. I was a case manager for some time. I did IT work there also, operations work. So outside of that is more of a social service counseling type field.
I grew up around preachers. Preachers seemingly run in my family. However, I do believe in the call of ministry, the call by God. So around my 19th year, I strongly felt that the Lord was calling me into preaching ministry.
Well, the story of how I became a preacher, it started when I actually met Tony, my husband. We both decided that we would start a ministry together while we were dating, and from there we started off with working with the youth at the church, and it grew very quickly, and then after that we kind of sort of started getting people following us, and once we got over to Refuge Temple Annex, and he started preaching a little bit more and having exposure, we decided that we would actually step out together. And at that point is when we both decided to be ordained preachers and to actually take it to another level and start preaching.
I really haven't experienced female opposition in the church in which I pastor or the denomination in which I pastor. I'm from what you would call an itinerant ministry, and women are welcomed in becoming even a bishop, which is the highest office of the CME Church. So I really haven't dealt with opposition.
Absolutely. One thing I noticed is that a lot of people, especially out of our denomination that we came out of, they would never refer to me as pastor. They would always refer to me as first lady. And it's kind of like you're able to be first lady, but you're not able to be a pastor. You're not able, even though you can speak or you can preach just as good as a male preacher or minister, they will always look at you as a first lady, or look at you only as an evangelist or someone or usher. Those are the main things that you can be. But being anything outside of that is kind of like, no, that's not your role to play.
I came from an organization that didn't support it. But the problem was that I started to read the Bible, and I saw some things that didn't make any sense in terms of when I would look at the Old Testament and I saw Deborah, the prophetess who was the judge of Israel, who had a husband. She was married, but she was the prophetess, the one that God used to speak to the nation, and as the judge of the nation, she oversaw the nation spiritually. So I said to myself, well, how is it that God can have her but not a pastor, a woman pastor? So one of the scriptures is 1 Timothy, I think chapter 3, talks about if any man desires the office of a bishop, he desires a good work. But in the Greek, it's not if any man desires the office, it's if any one desires the office of a bishop. So Greek being very definitive, a definitive language. If Paul meant specifically a man, he would have said it.
Wow, how has being married to the pastor, now his co-pastor, benefited our organization? I would like to, it has benefited because he's able to connect to a male point of view, and I'm able to connect to the females.
How's it benefited our ministry? Because she's good at what she does. In other words, you always need a varying viewpoint. So I have a viewpoint which is more intellectual or more technical in my approach, which is good, is necessary, but it's sometimes lacking the heart. And what Dre does very well is she touches the heart. So I think I can touch the head, she touches the heart, so it's a good mix, it's a good combination. So she brings a dimension that few preachers bring, and I often tell her that when she does preach, when she does minister, she's one of the best preachers that I've heard.
I've been attending Harding Memorial for about 10 years now. We got invited by my goddaughter, Sienna, who was much smaller at that time, and she called us up and said she's going to be singing in the choir, and we had to come to church. It was Easter Sunday, and so, you know, our big thing was, what are we going to wear to church? It's Easter, we have to really dress up. And then we ended up going to the church, and we just fell in love with it. We've been going ever since. I think some people are not in favor of female pastors because they just are afraid of change. And I think that they're used to things being done a certain way. They are used to the church looking a certain way. And I think that they may feel that a woman in general can't be in control of a congregation or can't kind of take charge of certain situations because they have a mindset of women being maybe, you know, not in a leadership role altogether. So to see them leading a congregation or leading a church is a foreign kind of concept for them.
Some of the differences between having a female pastor and having a male pastor is a female pastor is going to give you a female perspective. Females are typically more nurturing. I find that females are typically more nurturing, more forgiving, more compassionate, more loving, which are all characteristics that Jesus has. So I feel like they're good characteristics that you to have in the church, as opposed to a male a male pastor who's going to be a little bit more stern, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more dominant, which are not necessarily negative things. They're things that you need when you're dealing with people. So those are some of the differences that I find between having a male pastor and a female pastor. Although both males and females can be used by God equally, they'll still give you their perspective based on who they are.
My final statement would be that women preachers are something that that's a good thing. People need to embrace it. If you just read the Bible, folks, God calls women to preach and to serve Him, and He says, "I'll pour out my Spirit on my sons and daughters, and they shall prophesy." So let's just accept what God says. If you don't like it, you ain't got to come to our church. You know, you can do what you want to do, but this is what we do. I believe on the anointing that's on her life, and I guess as far as we're concerned, that's all that matters, is that she feeds the people that she ministers to.
I would say my last statement would be for women who are thinking about getting into ministry, if this is something that God has called you to do, forget about man. You know, at the end of the day, it's what Christ calls you to do that means the most. So if this is something that God is truly calling you to do, then operate in the ministry that God has called you to do.
I would say to women who are facing opposition in ministry, simply be encouraged. It was women who carried the good news, which is preaching. It's about carrying the good news. It was women who carried the good news when Jesus supposedly was dead, and they found out that He rose. And they had to go tell. They had to tell the good news. They had to run into the village. They had to go into the hedges and highways and says, He's alive.
His